Afternoon. We don't hear you in Lubbock.
How about now?
That's better.
All right, very good. Good to hear you. Glad y'all are doing well.
All is well.
All right. The Chihuly Exploring Glass assignments, you should have gotten an email from me in the wee hours early hours. If you turn your paper in, I have those for the students in this class, students in Lubbock and Plainview. Those are in campus mail, and they should arrive to you soon. Anyway, I took care of all of that last night. I've been pushing hard to try to get this mosaic done, and I want to show you a little sneak peek of the mosaic today if y'all would like to see it. And some of you have seen it in person if you're here in Levelland. But I do have these papers, so you can get those. A few of you that turn them in to me, you can get those a little bit later as we get finished up here today. I want to try to do several things. I'm glad to see you all. I know the weather is sometimes a factor, but it's not bad today, is it? It's just kind of that misty, it's fall. Yes, ma'am? I saw you working. You saw, oh, why didn't you stop by? You saw us working. Yeah. Were we up on the scissor lift?
I thought it was so cool that, I don't know, I passed by it a couple times and I just always look at it now.
Well, thank you. Thanks.
I just feel on it.
Well, I'm not working today on the mosaic, but you folks in Plainview and Lubbock, students are asking me or saying something about the mosaic that we've been working on here in town. I'll show you some slides from that here in just a moment. I want to make sure, though, that everyone has or will turn in your Christina's World. And if you, that our criticism, I think, is very important. It goes to the heart of what we're doing in this class, is to learn to look at a work of art and have confidence. That's the key word right there, is have confidence in knowing that you have the ability to look at a work of art and be able to talk about it intelligently. That's kind of empowering. I mean, it's not kind of, it is empowering. It really is. And I saw this thing. I'm here today. I'm glad to be here. I did not have a real restful night because we've been pushing to get this mosaic done. And you know, I suffered a back injury about 10 years ago and had surgery, so I'm blessed that I can do this, that I can even walk across campus. I can outwalk most of this class on campus, right? Anyway, I'm blessed that I can do that, but sometimes it gets to me. And so I understand little aches and pains and things that interrupt our flow of whatever. What I was going to say, though, early this morning, about 5:30, is not my usual waking up time, but I woke up and I think I put an ice pack on my shoulder. We've been scrubbing this tile, cleaning all the tile. I'll show you in a moment kind of what we've been doing. But I thought, okay, I don't feel like reading, which is what I like to do a lot of times. But I just flipped on the TV and it was on PBS. And it was some guy talking about aging. I thought, well, I don't need to feel older, but he was giving tips about feeling better and how to feel better. And one of the things was to push yourself out of your comfort zone. Now, I think I showed you this. Remember when I drew that little diagram of the box and said that I'm going to try to push your boundaries out? That's what we're doing. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it very much. Oh yeah, good. Because I could not read it. Thank you so much. That's excellent. Okay. By the way, if some of you have sent me a paper, you couldn't send it, you don't have a scanner, and you photographed it with your phone or device, and you sent it, go ahead and turn in the paper as well, because it's good for me to have the hard copy. I did, my eyes are pretty good close up. I don't have to wear reading glasses or anything. But I did pull a big magnifying glass out last night and enlarge the images on computer as well as I could, and I still had to use the magnifying glass, and some of them I could not read well. So if you've got an email from me, to please send that document, the paper, as well as turning it in that way. I appreciate you doing that, so you'll be on time. But back to what I said just a moment ago. Even me, I have boundaries, okay? And where I'm comfortable. We all do. But what this little show was talking about is it's a very healthy thing, and it's actually going to make you happier to push those boundaries out and go out of your comfort zone. And you think that's an oxymoron, Mr. Ho. Don't call me that name, no. That's an oxymoron. That means that it's opposite of what it sounds like, right? It's the opposite meaning. But actually it's not, because the researchers have studied this, and they said once you push yourself past those boundaries where you feel comfortable, you try something new, you go to a new place, you try a new kind of food, you go to a new restaurant, you try a new experience. If you don't feel confident in doing art, but you've always thought, that would be cool to do that, to draw or anything else. Gosh, how many YouTube videos are there that show you how to do things? Now, be careful, because a lot of them are not good, right? But some of them are just ridiculous. But push your boundaries out there, and that's what you're doing with these things that I've asked you to do. I've said it's required. It is required. So make sure, if you've not turned these in, everyone was good about the Chihuly. I got almost every one, and I think I'll get all those taken care of. But this art criticism with Christina's World, I wanted you to do that for a reason, because I wanted you to learn something from it that sticks with you. Now I'm going to put this on screen here, and I'm going to talk about this, but you want to know the real story of Christina, right? So that's what I want to talk about. Now, I want to say this before I switch to this. What you wrote, if it's different than what I tell you about the real Christina Olson and the real place and what Andrew Wyeth said about this, is it wrong what you wrote? It is not. It is following what I said to do to respond to the work. And that's going to make it correct. So if it's different, that's one thing, right? But it's not wrong. What you did is not wrong. So y'all be patient with me as I get those. They're just due today, but as I get those, I will do my best to get those graded. But I will read every one, and I will, the ones that I have in my hand, I will write notes on there, and I will give you points. I was pretty generous, wasn't I, on the Chihuly?
Yeah.
Some didn't do as much, some did more, but I tried to be generous and reward you accordingly. All right. So let's go to this. Let's look at this. Now, Andrew Wyeth did this painting in 1948, Christina's World. There we go. And I said he worked on this for off and on for about a year. How could you spend that much time on something? Well, I can tell you it's possible. If you have a goal in mind and you want to achieve something, and whatever it is in your personal life, or your business life, or whatever, or especially an artistic or creative endeavor of some kind, to work on that, because you have this mind's eye image of what you want to do. And Andrew Wyeth had been at this house, actually there, because he was visiting in Maine. That's where this is. It's on the coast of Maine. And he was visiting there in the summer with his parents. He was still in his early 20s, and he was not married yet, but he met this young girl. Let me switch my camera back, and I'll go to that in a moment. He was with this young girl, and he had already sold some of his watercolors in some galleries. He was trying to make a name for himself, and he said, I need this studio to work at. And this local girl said, I know exactly the place. And she said, I want to take you to a place, and you'll meet this old couple. It's a brother and sister who have never married. They live in this house that was built in the colonial period. And when I say colonial period, what does that mean?
Whenever Americans first
when the United States was a colony before we became a nation. It was built in the early 1700s. That's this house. And so, he said, you know, she was a cute girl, Betsy was her name. He liked her company, and then she was trying to encourage what he was doing. Ladies, remember that. Encourage, or guys, remember, encourage your boyfriend or girlfriend or your mate's endeavors. And she said, I know the perfect place, and you'll love these people. And she said, it's an old house, but they've got the whole top floor vacant. And so I'll bet that they'd let you use that as your gallery space, and they wouldn't charge you much of anything. And so he went and met Christina Olson and her brother Alvaro, and he said, I was surprised because here was this old couple who had never married, who had lived in their family home all their life, taking care of the farm, and he said they were delightful. There was a lot of fun. They joked, they laughed, and he said, you know, I was pretty much sold from the first few minutes that I visited with them. And then they took me upstairs, this old dusty staircase that no one even walked on, and upstairs, and he said, some people might think it was creepy, but it was amazing. Here's this whole huge room that I could use as my gallery space. And they said, just come whenever you want. The door's we don't lock the door. Come and work as long as you want to. You know, whatever you need, just let us know. And so that's what he did. And he was working on some other works. And he said one day he looked out the window, and the thing that some of you may have guessed and some of you may have done research, some of you may know, is Christina Olson was paralyzed. Possibly polio, some other disease that paralyzed her. Now, polio was almost wiped off the face of the earth a few years ago. It's back now, sadly. I have a cousin who, in the late 40s, developed polio. He was in an iron lung for almost a year. He was crippled the rest of his life. He learned to get around with his handicap. He could walk. He had a very noticeable limp, but I still know people like that. I know some people in their 80s here in Levelland who had polio during this period of time. I remember the polio vaccine. Now, it was a real vaccine. You took it once, and that was it. Actually, we had 2 doses. So we lined up at one of the elementary schools here, and we had a sugar cube with the dose of the vaccine on it, and we each got one of those. And then we came back a couple of weeks and got another one. And no polio. Pretty soon the U.S. was pretty much polio-free. So here's this situation. And Andrew Wyeth had seen her in the wheelchair in the house, but he said he looked out the window, and way down the hill there was a garden, and he said he saw Christina pulling herself up with a basket of vegetables coming up the hill. He said it hit me like a bolt of lightning. He said, I had no idea she could do that. And he said, I just thought, I have to do something about this. So, no wheelchair, because she couldn't go down the hill anyway. And he said she had that kind of mobility. She could crawl up and down stairs and do everything. She was just that kind of person. But Andrew Wyeth said, I just kept thinking, what could I do? How could I depict this, my feeling about this, and paint Christina's world? So he said he went to dinner that night with Betsy. They were dating, and went to a dinner party. He said, I couldn't eat. So I had to get up and excuse myself after we began eating. And he said, I went out and found a piece of paper, and I did a quick gesture drawing. Now here's the house, what it looks like. It's now a museum. But this is the drawing that he did. Now, some of you have done gesture drawings, right? That's a quick sketch to try to record something. But can you see the figure of Christina there, if you use your imagination a little bit? Maybe. And that, I think that's a depiction of the basket or bucket, whatever she was carrying the vegetables in. And he even indicated the horizon line up there. You see that? And sort of the sweep of the field. Think about that for a minute. Go back to this. And you can see her figure in that position stretched out. And he said, then I could go back and I could eat. I could relax. Because he said, I didn't want to lose that impression I had in my mind. And then I began to work. And so he did drawings of her. And you can see the relationship of this and this, can't you? And then he began to work on the house. But his is one of his first sketches where he really began to lay out the organization of it, or what we call the composition. You even see he gridded it off so he could figure out how to enlarge it onto the canvas or on the panel that he used. And then he did detailed drawings of her arms and her hands, her in this position. Now think about this, in detailed drawings of the house. What if he had drawn it from that window, the perspective of that window, seeing her down in the field? Wouldn't have had nearly the impact, would have. He's putting us in the field, so we see her and we're looking up at her world there. And we're given a mystery. We're wondering what's going on. So that's one of the things that's intriguing about this. He did color studies in watercolor to see how he wanted to make it look, and finally arrived at the painting. Now, this will surprise you. This was years and years later when she was an older woman. But Andrew Wyeth was a very well-known artist. This painting was one of the most famous American paintings ever done. It was famous all around the world. It became a postage stamp. And Andrew Wyeth said as long as he lived, he got letters about this painting. People asking him about it. People saying, I love your work. This painting is so powerful. I love the message of it. And he said sometimes they were right and sometimes they were wrong, but it didn't matter. They were impressed by it. But here's Christina as an older woman, her brother Alvaro and Andrew Wyeth, not in his early 20s anymore, but an older man. That's him and his wife Betsy when they were younger. And this is the house as it appears today. The Farnsworth Museum is the website you can go to and check that out. Now I'll tell you something about this. I've known about this painting from the time I was younger than you all are. And so the only time I've been to New York City, we made a beeline one day to the Museum of Modern Art, and I wanted to see Christina's World firsthand. And I had a list of some other paintings I wanted to see that I did get to see. But when we went to the room, they directed us, it's in this room. The man that was there in that room said, oh, I'm sorry, it's on tour. I couldn't believe it. The painting is on tour, but it was at a special showing at this house. So I thought that was pretty cool, but I was so disappointed that I didn't get to see it up close. Now, I've seen other Andrew Wyeth works. There was the Three Generations of Wyeth show in Dallas a few years ago. I've seen many other works. Dallas Museum has a collection of his. But I've never gotten to see Christina's World up close in person. But this house was preserved. There was a group of people that got together after the Olsons died, and they said, this is iconic. We need to save it. So they restored it. It's now a museum. It has some of the drawings and paintings in there that Andrew Wyeth did. Now, Andrew Wyeth would look down the hill, and there's the barn that you see in that painting. And down the hill from that is the family cemetery that's been there since colonial period. And Andrew Wyeth, that's where Christina and her brother were buried after they passed away. Andrew Wyeth told his family one day, I wonder if the Olsons would let me be buried there when I pass away. And so they asked the family, and they said, you're part of the family anyway. Because he spent 40-some years working in that room doing paintings. And so when he died in 2009, he was buried there. And unless she's died recently, his wife's still alive, but they have plans for her to be buried there beside him, on the place where they first got to know one another. Kind of special. Anyway, that's Christina's World. Now, like I said, sometimes your impressions, my impressions, may not be the same thing as the artist. Now, how many of you felt like this Christina's World is more one style or the other? How many of you think that it's the literal qualities or imitationalism? Let me see your hand. Okay. How many of you think it's more emotionalism? Okay. And hopefully you wrote in there what's your impression. And I haven't read any of the ones that were sent to me. How many of you think that it's more formalism, that the composition was really strong? Okay. That's the most important thing. Did anyone think it was surrealism? Would it surprise you for me to tell you that Andrew Weiss said, I really think my work is very realistic. I work on the details so hard. But he said, I want to try to get the emotion in there too. So he said, you might call me a surrealist. Because I change things. And you, if you'd seen pictures, well, one of the pictures I had, there are all these trees behind the house. Just over that hill is the ocean. The Atlantic Ocean. And it was very green the day that Andrew Weiss saw it. Saw Christina. I mean, she was picking vegetables down in the garden. So it was very green. What if he had made this green? Not nearly the same, right? So he said, I changed it because I wanted the emotional feeling. I wanted to put the viewer her close to the viewer, and the viewer down there. And he said, I really wanted people to feel like they're almost floating in the air and looking at this scene. So that's what his opinion was of it. Anyway, any comments or questions? Did y'all enjoy doing this? Did you feel like you learned something from it? Yes, ma'am. Okay, let me show you. Let me go back to this. And I saw this in 2 houses in town the other day. I have a clothesline in my backyard that I hang towels on and things once I use them. But that little bit of stuff there is something hanging on the clothesline blowing in the wind. Now, I've had people call it scarecrow and all kinds of crazy things, but anyway, nothing real mysterious, because it's a country home, right? We didn't have a dryer at home until I was in junior high. Yeah, anyway, so we always hung our clothes out. All right. But, and again, it's your state of mind, right? And we said it's relative. So all of you have maybe different things because of your own experience. Yes, sir? Yeah, you can send me an email with that in there or whatever. Yeah, just tell me what your thoughts are about it, why you would choose that. Yeah, if y'all didn't put that as theory in there, you can still send me that today and let me know what you think. Anyway, I hope y'all got something from this. But now, will you take all that much time? We took 2 days of class to do that, and some of you worked on it outside of class. You won't always do that. You always don't have the same time in a museum to do that. I wanted to underscore this, so this is what you can do. And it is within your realm, right? Even though you may have had to push a little bit, or I pushed you a little bit to do it, it's within your realm to do it. And it'll make the experience more enjoyable. And it doesn't matter whether you go into the museum at Wayland, in Plainview, or in Lubbock, the Tech Museum, or you go to the Louvre in Paris. You can experience it maybe better because of doing this. All right. Any other comments or questions? Very good. I look forward to reading what you've written, and I'm going to do a switch real quick here of my drive. And I know some of you have wondered I've got to get there we go. Now, some of you wondered, because I've talked about doing this new project. We've talked about mosaics and what that entails, but I want to show you this real quickly. And this isn't many slides that I'm showing you. But, it's still ongoing. We're getting ready to grout. And, that's sort of the final step, and then polishing it, sealing the grout. Come on now. It's gotta open up. Oh, cannot believe that. There we go. I just need to be patient for a moment. But someone asked me, they came by the other day and they said, when did you start this? And I said, well, we really started talking about this a year ago with the client. They called us, they'd seen an article that was in Senior Link magazine that had some of our work in it, and they said, would you like to do a mosaic for this new building? We're gonna build a quick lane business here in Levelland, and this is the Smith Ford family. And so they had some ideas, we had some ideas, so we talked back and forth for 3 or 4 weeks about ideas, and so we came up with this design, which is what they wanted. Now, you'll see it on the building just opposite of this, but this is the design as we worked on it, because you do these in reverse, and you glue the tile face down onto a reverse pattern, and I'll show you in a moment. But the idea was that if you take care of your car, that's what their business is about, then you can travel and have fun as a family. So we had designs showing the family doing, going to a balloon viewing like at Albuquerque, doing all kinds of things, signs that pointed to different directions, and we finally simplified it just to a landscape that could be a lot of different places. And so we had from day to night. And really this reads just backwards from this, if you see it. And then to show sort of a desert landscape, but mountains in there, but to be a simplified design. But the hard part was to get this perspective right and do it with little 3/4 inch glass tile. So that was the first thing we did. And we did it in our shop at home, and we only had a 4x8 work table. Now this mosaic, when you see it, is not as big as the ones here on campus. It's only 6 feet by 12 feet. But when I say only, that's big, right? 6 feet by 12 feet. So what you're seeing, I wanted to do the very hardest part first. I would tell you, if you're doing a hard job, do the hard part first, and then everything else is kind of downhill from there. So it's not fun sometimes to pick out the hard thing. So to do the lines and all this design, and then we used a projector to project it onto a paper pattern, and we had the full 6 by 12 foot paper pattern on the wall to project it. But then we did horizontal, vertical lines. We did all kinds of key lines on this, but we could only work on a section at a time, so we had to divide it up. But you can see that those are 3/4 inch tile that we're gluing down, face down to the paper design, but how some of them had to be cut detailed to make that sweep of the perspective. And if you go down and see it, you can see that. And this is me working on another section of the landscape, but you can see the textured back of the tile that helps it bond into the mortar. And that's all the colors that we had out there, and working on the bushes. And we wanted this to be sort of a very bright and eye-catching design. Now this was after 4+ months of working on the tile. And you can see there in this picture, we had it laid out in the back parts room at Quick Lane. We transported it there in my little pickup, stacked up with foam pads and bubble wrap and everything so we wouldn't hurt it. And you can see how it's divided up there into sections. But my wife is doing a little repair on one part as transporting it made some of the tile loose. But that's it laid out in the floor there. So her being there kind of gives you a scale of it, doesn't it? It's huge. And you think, wow, how would you do that? Well, just little bit by little bit. So this is a slide of the actual mounted work, which we did a week ago last Saturday. It's just been up on the wall, all the pieces. We worked for 3 weeks mounting it with mortar on the wall onto a masonry wall, so it's as solid as the building. But you see the pattern now correctly, right? That was our guide pattern. And someone came by and they said, I thought someone had graffitied that, or what's that metal strapping? It's just duct tape to help reinforce the pieces. But also when you put the mortar up on the wall and you put mortar on the back of the glass, you mount it up there and you're working about a foot to 2 square feet. The mortar, gravity is working on it, right? It's a force. So you have to get it in place and use duct tape to help hold it in place. And you can only work across a row, and then you have to let that sit for a day and then come back and you can work on the next row after that's cured. So we did it piece by piece, over 3 weeks. And then we had it mounted. But then this shows the fun part, because this is my wife washing it off. And you just spray it with water and use a scrubbing brush and a putty knife, and real carefully you're scraping off the paper and paste. And it's a mess. And when that dries, I cut my hand on some of that dried paper and paste. That's how hard it is. So you're working a lot, and we worked on that over a week to clear all that paper and the paste off there, and of course all the tape and everything. And we went back and did repairs yesterday. That's me scrubbing off. That's me. And my wild windblown look there. But a lot of work. And then we've gone back yesterday and we filled in areas and to get all of the repairs done. And then we're getting ready to grout the work, polish it, seal it, so it'll be ready to last 20 years or more with no cracks or anything else. All right, does that help give you some ideas? But I'll tell you that there are some places on that the colors of the tile are very iridescent. They're just beautiful to see up close. So if you drive by, it's one thing, but if you pull into the parking lot and just get out and look, they don't mind. They're happy to have people come visit. They wanted this to be sort of a showpiece. Nobody will come bother you and try to sell you tires or batteries or anything. Yes, sir. Pardon? It will be finished hopefully by the end of this week. We'll have all the grouting done and sealing the grout and everything. Lord willing, and the weather doesn't get too bad. But you can go by and see it now. It's pretty much, it looks finished. There's some tape on it where we plugged in some tile on the edge because there was just a little discrepancy in the way that the mason made the space. Yeah, you can see it pretty much finished. So anyway, and the stars there that you see in the edges of the moon and the tips of the sun rays are all that gold leaf tile. So it really shows up. There's some pink and blue lusters in the clouds that you can only appreciate when you get up close. Anyway, I appreciate y'all being interested in it. Those of you in Lubbock or Plainview, come to Loveland and see it. I think you'll enjoy it. But I'll let you know, they're supposed to have an unveiling sometime. So anyway, I'll let you know, keep you posted. I'm not sure if it'll be this week or next week, but they'll have to decide about that. Okay, so we're going to forge on now to Unit 3, which actually begins, I'm going to do it a little bit out of order, page numbers. If you're looking in your text, page 228 is where this begins, chapter 9, but I'm going to skip ahead to chapter 10 because it's one of the first art forms. Probably architecture was first. People had to make shelter, right? After they left paradise in the Garden of Eden, they had to find a way to keep themselves warm and find a good place to live. They didn't have that provided for them anymore. But let's start here. And I'll show you some of the slides that are in the text, and then I'll show you some of the slides that are I've added in there. I want to start with this. One of the greatest sculptures ever made, I think, is Michelangelo's David, and this is a close-up of David. Now think about this, and we'll talk about all the different types of sculpture that there are, but think about in the 1500s, 1400s, 1500s, artists didn't have any power tools. They had a rudimentary drill, no carbide tipped anything. They had hardened steel, hammers and chisels, and they did have rasp files, and they had sort of a homemade sandpaper. And Michelangelo did this sculpture of David with one of the hardest substances. Y'all know the Mohs scale? You've had geology or science or whatever. A diamond is a 10 on the Mohs scale, right? Marble is an 8 or a 9. Taking a chisel and hammer and chiseling that out. And I'll talk more about this David sculpture later, but that's a pretty amazing thing, to make it look so lifelike, larger than life size, and to be such an amazing sculpture. Now, let's go to the text for a minute, and let's talk about some of the things they show. And I'm not going to dwell on too many of these things, but they do make some good points here. Akuama sculptures, the people in Ghana, Africa, show the purpose of this is for a fertility rite that they do with the people, so that they'll ensure that they conceive and have children. Petition to the spirit world for asking for this idea of the family being a family. And so the husband and the wife having children. So sculptures have different reasons. Sometimes it's purely aesthetic, but many times it is for a deeper reason. So these people believe that the sculpture helps ensure that they will have children. And then it shows these good luck figures that are there. And people place these things on the shrines. And that seems very superstitious to many people, many of us. But many people in the world have things like this. And I know people that have a lucky charm or a lucky keychain or whatever. We do some of the same thing, don't we? And this shows this sculpture, which is a bronze sculpture, and we'll talk about bronze. This is on page 252 in your text, that shows these sculptures that are around life size, over almost 6 feet tall, that are cast there, that was on display at the Sculpture Center in Dallas, downtown Dallas. And it's like the inside impression of a body there. But sculptures, public sculptures, we have them, public art in all of our towns. And this shows an exhibit that was put up in this place, this great hall, Manchester, England. I'm not familiar with a lot of these, but it's made from molds of people there in Newcastle, but put together with different materials to show the impression of the people. And people have been making art as long as there have been people. They've been taking materials. We'll talk about all this later, so you don't need to know what a patina is right now or all this. We've seen one Deborah Butterfield work before, right? You remember Verde, the horse, made out of junk pieces of metal she cut up. Here's one she calls Rosie, and you can see why. The color, a lot of times animals, dogs, cats, horses, whatever, they're named after maybe the color or pattern that you have. So she used this metal, and again, her only subject is horses. So she made this sculpture in the form of a horse, not realistic. Here's this llama figure. This is a little more expensive material, done around 1500 out of gold. One of the reasons the Spanish came to the Americas, Spanish civilizations centered around finding gold and getting rich. So here's this beautiful little sculpture of a llama made of gold, solid gold. Can you see the bird there? Brancusi, Constantine Brancusi, the Italian sculptor, did this bird in space, not to show the bird realistically, but maybe just the gracefulness of the bird shape or the wing shape, bird in space. So you'll see realistic sculptures, you'll see abstract things. This is on the next page, 256 in your text, Gian Lorenzo Bernini. And Bernini did this sculpture we've seen before. You remember? This is Apollo and Daphne. Daphne was not really willing to be caught by the suitor Apollo. So she asked the gods to help her turn into a tree, and so she became a tree. So he sculpted this out of marble in 1622. Well, he was inspired by what had already been done by Michelangelo and other masters. But if you go to Rome, go to this gallery, you see this sculpture. It's larger than life size. It's 8 feet tall. It wouldn't go through the doorway without tilting it. So it's tall as a normal room. On the pedestal there, from the pedestal up, that's how tall it is, not counting the pedestal. So your author's talking about how they caught motion. That's when we saw this. And talking about kinetic art, which we had already talked about, real motion, or the implied motion. Here's this sculpture that appears to move and has moving elements in it. We talked about Calder's Mobile and so on. So you have all kinds of different things. This has mechanical parts to it, and it has these cables that help it move. Now I wanted to show this and talk about sculpture in this way. Do any of you know the story Pygmalion, George Bernard Shaw? Did anybody study that in school, in English class, literature class? Did any of you know the story of the movie My Fair Lady? Check it out, ladies, you'll like it. Audrey Hepburn is this street urchin, this flower girl who's selling flowers on the street corner in London. She's poor. She has this thick Cockney accent, and these men are talking about, oh, I can make anyone sophisticated and pass them off in sophisticated society. So that's the wager that they have, and they take this young girl, Audrey Hepburn plays this girl, Eliza Doolittle, in the movie My Fair Lady. But it's based on the story of Pygmalion, so they really turn her into the society girl, but deep down she's still who she is. But the story comes from this old Greek tale of Pygmalion in Galatia. Pygmalion is sculpting this sculpture out of marble, and he prays to the gods, and he falls in love with his own sculpture. Now, we're not going to talk about his mental health right now, okay? But he falls in love with his own sculpture, and he said, it's so beautiful, I wish that it could become real. And so here's Cupid that appears and shoots the arrow, and look what's happening to the marble sculpture that he's chipped away at. It's becoming this real woman. So it's the desire of sculptors more so than painters, because they're working in three-dimensional means, right? To make something so realistic that it would look like something from life. Well, that's the story, right? Now, sculpture, and your text talks about this on page 257, 58, talks about relief sculpture. We've already talked about this, right? We've talked about what bas relief or low relief, just barely raised from the surface, is, what high relief is, and what freestanding sculpture is. So we'll look at those different things, and then we'll talk about installations and so on in the time that we have. We'll get to some of that today. Now, I want you to think of sculpture in these two basic divisions. It can be subtractive or it can be additive. Carving makes sense, right? You're subtracting. You're taking a chisel and you're carving away stone or wood. You're taking the unwanted materials away. Additive process, you're adding and we'll talk about the casting process and so on. When I was a kid, my dad would take me to this barber shop, and the only good thing about it, because they didn't give good haircuts there, they cut your hair like an old man, and I was 10 years old. I didn't like that very much. But anyway, they would give you bubble gum, and the bubble gum had a comic inside, the comic strip. You opened it up, and there was an Archie comic, and so Jughead, I wish I had that. Maybe I could probably find it online. He's carved an elephant, and Archie says, "That's so great, Jughead. How did you do this carving of an elephant?" He said, "I just chipped away everything that didn't look like the elephant." Well, Michelangelo said very much the same thing. In fact, Michelangelo, he said he got a vision from God when he looked at a stone, and he was just releasing the form that was in there. So he was taking away everything that didn't look like that. So we'll talk about these in turn as we go on. So carving is removing parts of material. Using stone, wood, it could be ivory. You can't really do that unless it's a special kind of ivory these days. But you'll see that in the history, and people have done that. Now this is in your text, and I'm kind of skipping around here, but it's page 263 in your text. I did this slide presentation, by the way, about 2 this morning, so hopefully the slides are in pretty good shape. After I finished grading everything, I was tired, but I was energized because I wanted to get this ready for you today. Because sculpture is one of my favorite things. When I did my undergraduate work, I was a sculpture student. I learned to carve stone, I learned to cast metal. I was not afraid of doing these big pots of molten metal. In fact, I worked at a bronze foundry for a year. And it's dangerous work, but I love doing it. I've been to a stone quarry in South Texas and picked out stone and then brought it back and carved it with hammer and chisel and tools. But that's what this person is doing now. That's kind of a simplified version of what it's like there. But usually the artist nowadays has a model, and there's some evidence that Michelangelo made some models. And then he used that model and scaled it up. But if the artist has a vision in their mind that's clear enough and they're releasing this material, they're just cutting it away. So that's what you're seeing here. Again, much simplified. Artists use power tools now like crazy to do this. But here's Michelangelo's unfinished slave. You say, well, was he lazy? He was the most unlazy person in the world. When you see this, this is one of the sculptures that Michelangelo was commanded by the Pope to do for the Pope's tomb. Well, he said, Your Holiness, I am busy working on your chapel. He was painting the Sistine Chapel at the same time. And he had already convinced the Pope that he was a sculptor, not a painter, and he said, no, you can paint this. So he did one of the greatest paintings ever. But at the same time, the Pope kept sending emissaries or kept visiting him and saying, when are you going to get my tomb sculptures finished? And he was just, okay. At one point, he got so frustrated, he just left Rome. Well, we see the Pope in the news now, right? He's this kindly, gentlemanly, older man. The Pope went to war in those days. He put on armor and he fought. Serious. So he threatened to have Michelangelo thrown into prison or worse if he didn't come back. Michelangelo hid for quite a month or two. And finally he came back, but he couldn't finish all this. It was just impossible. But you can see these. I'll show these later. You can see them in the Academy Gallery there in Florence. But here's an example of low relief, bas relief, right? Just like the image on the coin. It's just barely carved away, so the raised image is barely projecting from the surface. That's low relief. And the word there is bas, right? B-A-S. And we've looked at some of these before. The Egyptians did this amazing carving of these hieroglyphs by taking a chisel, copper chisel probably, and carving away the softer limestone to leave these raised areas standing up. That's pretty amazing, really, that they did this. And here's a fragment of the Parthenon. We've seen the Parthenon, right? Well, this is in the Louvre in Paris. And some of the Parthenon sculptures were stolen by Lord Elgin and taken to London. That's where they still are. And I've heard that every year the people from Athens, Greece, send someone and they say, we would like our sculptures back. We're restoring the Parthenon. Could we please have our sculptures? They were stolen. We'll think about it, they say. We'll see what happens. But that's more high relief, isn't it? And these decorated the edge of the Parthenon. Now this is truly high relief. You have this on page 259. Augustus St. Gaudens was an amazing sculptor. And this is to honor these men, these black soldiers. Why can't I think of the name of the movie? Matthew Broderick is in the movie. Have you all seen it? I'll have the name next time. I'm sorry. But it's a famous story about this man who was told to take over these black troops at the beginning of the Civil War. Now, these were men who had their freedom, and they wanted to fight for the cause against the South. Pardon? Glory. Yeah. So simple I couldn't remember it. I can come up with oxymoron, but not glory. All right. Thank you. Yeah, Glory. Check it out. I recommend the movie. It's war. It's sad, but it's an amazing story of a real event that happened, and these black soldiers that followed this man, Robert Goldshaw, into battle. I won't tell you much more about it. I don't want to spoil it. It's a great movie. But this honors those soldiers and their commander. And these are all black soldiers. But more high relief. You can see how far the horse is almost totally projecting out from the back. This is done cast in bronze. But you can see it has depth to it, right? Real depth. This is sculpture. More blocky. You can almost see the block all the way up, can't you? This sculpture done by Egyptian sculptors of Lady Sunui. And realistic to an extent, but not as realistic. And that's kind of the style of ancient Egypt. And this whole thing of frontality we've talked about. We'll talk about some more. This is a Greek sculpture, what's called a Koros. It's only 3 feet tall, partly broken. Anything that survived from 480 BC likely is broken, but not crushed to rubble like the different warring armies would do. Did y'all see that the Taliban had already blown up one of the sculptures, the Buddhas, and they started shooting at it again yesterday? Go away, find something else to do. I mean, you've already blown it up. But here's the sculpture, much more realistic, right? Much more real. But the Greeks idealized things. We'll talk about that later on. But they were always showing, we know the sculptor's name, Praxiteles, was the guy who carved this. Out of marble, Hermes and Dionysus. Here's another sculpture with the heads and arms broken off. That was pried off the Parthenon. And I think this is in the British Museum in London. Now, this is Italian artist Gian Bologna. Terrible scene here. I mean, terror and horror. This woman's being attacked by these men. But when you talk about a freestanding sculpture, we're going from low relief to high relief to freestanding. You can walk all the way around it. I've seen this. It's in a little piazza. You walk through. It's an open air area. Part of it is, and you can walk in there and see this sculpture, which is huge. It's almost. I think that's supposed to say 13 feet 6 inches high. Would be 16 inches, right? Anyway, 13 feet 6 inches high. So that's wrong. That caption. But this is a huge thing. It just towers above you. And to carve this out of stone to look like, and this is all one piece of stone, so it looks like separate figures there put together. But these men attacking this woman is a real event that really happened there. Here's another view of it. Yeah, 13 feet 6 inches. And since it's partly outdoors, you can see it's got some staining on it. But this scene of this crime, this attack on this woman, all three-dimensional, freestanding. Now going back to low relief, right? If you ran your hands across this, someone would tell you, quit doing that. No. If you ran your hands across this in the museum, you would feel just a slight difference, wouldn't you? But didn't they do a great job, the Assyrian sculptor that did this, of showing this lioness, this female lion, in the death throes? Sad picture, really. The sport of kings, right? Hunting lions. You do know that there are lions in every county in Texas now, mountain lions. They're here in this county, they're in Lubbock County, they're in Hale County. There's a picture, someone sent me this and I couldn't find it online, of this mountain lion coming up to the nursing home in Muleshoe and looking in the door, the glass door. Kind of creepy, but they usually shy away from people. But the game wardens say their paw prints have been found around some of these ranch lands around here. But to carve this, just barely carve it away and make it look so realistic. It's very skillful. Here's another sculpture of the lion, memorial to King Leopold, the Belgians. Much more high relief, and the angels attending there. And here's a carving in wood, this Hawaiian god, war god. Have any of you been to central Mexico, seen these Olmec heads? There used to be one, probably still there in the Mercado. You used to be able to safely cross the bridge there at El Paso, go over and shop. I wouldn't recommend it today, but anyway. They used to have one of these huge Olmec heads. Look how tall this is, almost 6 feet tall. Carved out of basalt, which is a volcanic stone, which is a 9 on the hardness scale. But who knows, hundreds and thousands of years ago, someone did this. So you see all these amazing sculptures. This is ceramic. We'll talk about additive processes later. But I wanted to show you this, and we'll finish up with this today. Here's Jim Sardonis carving with air-powered tools. So he's not having the hammer and chisel, using chisel and hammer on it, but he's using air power. Hopefully he's using ear protection because this gets really loud. But he's using this to carve this polar bear, and he uses subjects like this. Now look at his other tool there. Any of you guys recognize that? It's a right angle grinder. Has a diamond blade on it, and he's got a shape drawn on there, but he's just gnawing away at this with this grinder, carving away. Of course, you've got to use breathing protection, hearing protection, eye protection to do this. But here are these two whales that he carved out of black granite, and they're mounted along the Pacific coast there. So where the whales breached there, and he's doing that as kind of a monument to them. So we'll pick up here next time and talk about this. I want to try to go through this on Thursday and then next Monday and Tuesday, and I may give you a test a week from Thursday, but I'll talk more about that. But I'll prepare you for it. If you've not turned in your art criticism, make sure you send that to me, please.
Mr. Hope, this is Judy.
Yes, Judy, hi.
Hi. No, I just wanted, I went ahead and sent you Edgar's art criticism.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I'll be looking for it. All right. Y'all take
Okay,
care.
thank you. You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye. Bye.
Que tenga buen día.
Igualmente, gracias.
Excuse me, would the exam permission be notes?
Was there a question or?